Mr. Ibrahim Kamstrup Akkaoui is the Vice President for Data Management Systems and Standards at Novo Nordisk, Denmark. He is a computer scientist who has been working in the IT and pharma industry for 20 years. Having started his learning journey with technical roles has given him a solid technical foundation within his field of work. For the past 7 years, he has possessed leadership positions in various global companies and has been leading teams across continents and cultures. This has provided him with wonderful opportunities to travel across the globe and work with some of the best minds in the industry. His main focus is to take few but impactful decisions which enable and improve overall business goals, mainly through simplification and digitalization of the work done, keeping in mind that everything is possible. A warm welcome to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of you who are attending. I hope that you can hear and see me loud and clear.
Yes, very clear, sir.
That sounds good. And thanks
Yes.
for the nice introduction. I'm actually really honored to be able to speak to, a chunk of a generation that's gonna help improve the world when I get older and maybe take part in ensuring that I get the best treatments possible through utilizing the best technologies at hand. So I also have to say I'm also pleased to be speaking to some of my Indian colleagues and partners in the industry here today because I haven't been to India for 2 years due to COVID, and usually it's actually my second home, as I call it, or maybe even I would say my third home because it might be that I live in Denmark now and I've lived in Denmark for the whole of my almost whole of my life. But I was born in a little country called Lebanon, and I came to Denmark in the mid 80s as a refugee together with my parents. So I got the opportunity to come here to study, to work with some really nice people, and I enjoy that, especially since that this has been a peaceful country since we've gotten here. But I've just booked my ticket for my first trip to India in a very long time, and I'm so excited to get back to Bangalore again soon. So a little bit of my background of what I've tried. Actually, being a young kid, I started working really early. I've never been afraid of working, and I've always took pride in taking responsibility. So I started my early days as a 12-year-old paper boy and working in across different supermarkets in the local area where I lived, and then later in a bread factory, and then I started getting into my studies, starting getting jobs that are more relevant for this business. So the mobile tech industry, on data handling and data management, programming and application development on system infrastructure. And then in 2007, I started working with clinical data management. And it really struck me that this was the way to go because, I also come from a home that where my parents wanted me to be the best I could. And from my culture, it's pretty much, I think, also like the culture in India sometimes, you have to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or things like that. And of course, my parents wanted me to become a doctor. And there was only one challenge in that. I did not want to become a doctor. So it's not that the interest was not there, but I had a bigger interest in technology. So combining this job with my interest and my hobbies, I'm actually landed in the best place, I would say. So not just I get advantage of the job that I do, but actually I'm in a place where I get to help millions and millions of people and patients around the world because I have, a keen interest and skills within this area. So there are many ways to make your impact on the world. And hopefully one day when you know, I grow old and can look back, I can be proud of my footprint globally in the world, having helped a lot of people, right? Without being a doctor. So that's the message I try to get through to my parents also, right? There are more ways to success than just being a doctor, but there's nothing wrong in being a doctor. Good. So today I'm a vice president in the company of Novo Nordisk, and I'm part of heading up an organization for data management that employs now over 300 people. And then you would say, well, a pharmaceutical company that has over 300 data managers, how come? Well, I wouldn't be lying if I tell you we are the center of the universe in the company, because everything we do today is based on data. And that is the asset that we possess in the company. And that's why I say, you know, everything circulates around our little hub here. So a very important function, and that's why we need to be a few colleagues. But also maybe not too many, because things also get complicated when you are too many working on the same product at a time. But I'll get a bit more into that in a moment. So a lot of is happening into the technology sphere. Also, when you're in a pharmaceutical company, and even though we invest a lot of money in producing the right molecules to create the right product, we also invest billions right now in having all the right technologies so that we get the best products to the market in a high quality, fast pace, available to the patients worldwide. And we do that by using technology. So now I'll get into my presentation, and I will try to my best to allow time for questions at the end. And I hope that you'll take the opportunity and advantage of, I'll try to answer as good as I can. All right, so data management, us as the front runner in value creation for Novo Nordisk and our clinical trials. And even though we are a pharmaceutical company, look at this beautiful vision we have for our data, right? It says we're a global healthcare leader powered by data analytics and digital technologies. That's everything that I do in my job. So that's beautiful. And if we look up into, you know, data, what is that? Well, it's not just ones and zeros in a long series, right? That is the output of, you know, when you go to the doctor, you get blood samples taken, right? There are results produced. Where do they go? Well, if you're part of a clinical study, they go to me. And I will make sure that these data can be handled, that they are cleaned, and that they can be used as part of the analysis, and also be submitted to the authorities so that they can utilize the data for their analysis, investigate what we have done, and inspect that, and then finally give us hopefully a thumbs up so we get a good, efficient product to the market for the benefit of our patients. And now I'm speaking of patients like, you know, it's everybody else. The truth is, you all know someone at some point who is or have been a patient. I also think you can be pretty sure that one day, me, you, everybody will become a patient. And that's why I feel, you know, when you work in the place that I do, you have an enormous responsibility to carry out your job well. But also you have the obligation to keep developing, right? And it's not just you personally who has to develop, but it's also ensuring that the technologies are developing in the right direction, You involve yourself in the market with suppliers of technologies. You take in the right technologies for your company to make sure that you can do the best analysis, the best handling of data, the best way of collecting data, right? So, you know, until not many years ago, we used to collect data on paper forms, right? And that's actually not really the case anymore. We hardly use paper in collecting data for clinical trials. Now we use, you know, devices like this. This is my iPhone where I can have apps to collect, you know, maybe I put in data about my daily treatments that I get, about the medications that I take, the doses that I use, and so on. And that data can be transferred to data management. And, you know, we can use that data as part of our analysis for developing new medication. There's also a lot about behaviorism data that can tell us a lot about, you know, how do the patients behave so that we can tailor a product, a treatment, or a drug that can, you know, help you throughout your day through certain behavioral patterns. This is also where wearables can help us. And wearables can collect now a lot of data from us. That's not a very old technology as such, but it's really ramping up and getting utilized more and more. And the functionalities are also increasing. We're also doing now gene sequencing. And this is where we start really to get into what we call big data, because usually when, you know, I used to work on clinical trials myself, the biggest trial I could imagine would have 1 gigabyte of data, and that is data from, you know, 10,000 patients. Now one sample from one patient will produce 5 to 6 terabytes of data. So it's a totally different type of data we're getting in, and it's a totally different size of data that we are getting into these days. And then, of course, you know, there are many more data sources. So imaging is also something you can do. And, you know, this is where you get to use your artificial intelligence, because it takes a long time to look through many images and scans, like the example here. But you can actually apply algorithms that has pattern recognitions and so on that can help you tell, you know, what is the activity here on this picture? Do we see a trend? Do we see a development over time when you do multiple images and so on? And that way you can, you know, maybe target a specific part of the brain that you want to treat, and that way help us in our work and analysis. So there could be a lot of things we could get into here, but let me tell you that, you know, as we get smarter, as we get more data, we also get ambitious because we know we can do much more. And, you know, if you look at the trends here, it looks like that, you know, we have to be, if we look benchmark from 2020 here, where we're supposed to be around 400 people, you know, if I look just, you know, in a couple of years ahead, we should be around 800 people. And that is because if we look at down here, the number of clinical trials that we want to conduct was around 120 to 130 trials. Now we're moving towards 250 clinical studies, right? And that's because we want to keep ensuring that we have the right treatments and products for our patients. But it's also possible because we have the data to direct us where we should be going, right? So the more data we collect, the better the analysis we can make, the better treatments we can target to our patients. And remember, as I said, one day we all gonna be patients. So if I'm sloppy at my work, at one day, you know, that's gonna bite me in the behind, right? So I better do my job well. You know, it could also be my family members. So Novo Nordisk is very known for diabetes treatment. And I have a father who's a diabetic, so, you know, the better job I do, the better opportunities he has to live a better life with the chronic disease that he has. So the thing is, you know, this is why I told you in the beginning, we cannot just grow like that. I mean, our pipeline should grow, of course, because the more and better products we have, the better it is for ourselves and everybody we know. But if we start doubling here, right, and you know the number of trials even go higher, right? So we're going to 1,000 people, 1,500 people. That's not what we're supposed to do, right? Because you know, the word of saying, you know, too many chefs in the kitchen will probably burn the food, and this is what we want to avoid. So instead of just having, you know, a one-to-one proportion between workload and number of employees, technology is the answer, right? And I've tried to make a little forecast here. What is it that's putting pressure on us? And if you're seeing, we are going to conduct analysis from data from, you know, an increasing number of patients in the pink circles. And if you look into the blue ones, it shows you, you know, back in 2011, we used to collect 110 million data points. I can actually tell you, if you go back 5 more years, so 2005, 2006, we used to collect about 5 million data points, right? 5, 6 years later, we're collecting 110 million data points. We're expecting to start collecting more than 800 million data points when we get to 24, but that's not counting, you know, all the device data from the wearables, from, you know, all the mass production of data from our phones and so on, and not from the genomic sequencing. Because if that number has to be here, I don't think I have space for all the zeros on this slide to tell you how much data we have to work with. And no matter how many people we employ, we'll never get to the bottom of looking at these data points, right? So we need smart technologies to help us. And that's why, you know, technology is the answer to every prayer that we have. So to give you a little bit of overview of how we work and the process flow of our work, I've brought with me a little movie here that you can lean back and watch. It takes about 2 minutes and explain a little bit about my world and what I deal with on a daily basis. So please enjoy.
Data collected in studies are crucial for Novo Nordisk business and for getting new state-of-the-art therapeutics on the market. And it all starts with the clinical study protocol and study data. For subjects, their journey starts with being enrolled into the study where the data collection starts. Subject data is collected continuously throughout the study, and the digital solutions must be set up by data management. We ensure we can capture the data with the right control measures in place, and we ensure that the data is monitored, cleaned, and in control. Our presence enables Novo Nordisk's ability to make informed decisions on our study results, and prepare for submissions for getting drugs to market. Data management has a crucial role in Novo Nordisk. We enable digital empowerment of data collection for subject and study data, ongoing data quality assurance and GCP adherence, and decision-making on data results and submissions for authorities. Data management in Novo Nordisk has initiated the journey towards modernizing ways of working and improving the digital enablement to support it. We call this the data management transformation, and the business value delivered is data management is off the critical path, increased quality with reduced costs, and fast turnover for study changes. The data management transformation covers many initiatives, and the common focal points are speed and cost effectiveness. We ensure that data management costs and resources swifts away from operations and towards focusing on progress of clinical studies. Selected success stories from the data management transformation are: data management no longer a bottleneck for trial setup. We save over 50 million Danish kroner in vendors' contract while reducing delivery timelines. And supported digitalization of high-profile studies, supported the EBIT implementation, showcased the reduced setup timelines for our data capture applications, and introduced the risk-based EM approach, allowing us to do more with less resources. Our critical success factors have been replacement of legacy systems, adoption of risk-based thinking, adoption of Agile in our processes, and adoption of robotic process automations.
Good. So hopefully that gave you a little insight to how we work, and hopefully the video came through with sound and everything. So
Yeah, it was good. It was good. You could hear it very clearly.
Yeah, the audio quality and everything was fine.
that sounds good. So I'll continue here, and the video you just saw here was basically representing what we do in the clinical development process, right? So we start, in the early days with research. Someone gets an idea, oh, we want to come up with a treatment like this or that, maybe by looking at data. They try to create a molecule that mimics that activity that we want in the body, and then start testing out that molecule in a preclinical setting. So, start creating tests on maybe different tissues, on, animal rat studies, on pigs, and so on. And when they find something that looks like it works and it's safe, and most importantly, well, we start scaling it up and preparing it for clinical testing. And this is where we start to help our colleagues, our medical colleagues, design the data collection applications, so we can collect the data that we want as the output of the studies that we're conducting. And we follow it all the way through into the market. So once the product has been marketed, we more or less let it go, but we keep ourselves available if someone asks for the data. If the regulatory authorities, they come and do inspections, or they have questions about the data, if they see some kind of side effects that they suspect, is that related to this drug or not? And then we help clarify some of these questions based on the data that we possess. And that's an exciting process to deal with. So our little landscape looks like this. So we start the data collection process. We do that through a variety of applications. So we have something called EDC, which is an Oracle product called, which is, EDC is electronic data capture. So instead moving away from the paper forms, now we're getting into applications. And this is like an electronic patient journal where we collect data from the patient, from the doctor at the clinical site. It could also be that we are setting up devices to collect specific data points that we want them to. That could be creating an app for, again, my iPhone or my smartwatch. We also set up databases to be able to collect data from our central labs. So this is where, when you get to the site, a clinical site, your doctor pulls out a blood sample, and that goes to the lab. But at some point, the data, as I told you before, that goes to me. And so on and so forth. And at some point, it ends up in my database, right? So that's what I possess. That's the asset that I possess, develop, and protect for the company. this is the clinical database, right? And that's where all the data gets into. Now we are, getting ready to expand on more types of data, because as the number of studies goes up, the therapeutic areas that we're looking into are increasing also and getting more diversified. We're also expecting different capabilities in order to handle these data, both from us personally, our skills, but also from our infrastructure to be able to handle it, both from a size and complexity perspective. And then when the data is here, this is where we have people who are good at setting up databases to capture the data, but they also program different checks. And this is not just about being a good programmer, but this is about understanding the data that you're doing programming for. So if I have to program checks that validates whether this data is correct, whether this data is somehow clean, I need to understand what the study is about, what the drug does, and combining these things. So my programs are working properly. So this is where you get an opportunity to combine your technical skills with science, what makes it really exciting, at least for guys like me. And then, of course, when the data is in a valid state and it's formatted in a standardized structure, we get into the visualization part, because now we have to facilitate the data so it can be used by ourselves and our scientists, right? And here, we use technologies like the Oracle Analytics Cloud, Power BI, ClickSense, and a range of visualization tools to look at the data in a smart way. And we have to do that because we can't look at all the data. I just showed you how much data we're collecting. No matter how many we are, we will need a smart tool to work on the data. And because the data is so big, eventually when we pool all the data together, we need a data lake where we can do big, heavy analysis, and also not just on data records, but also on pictures, images, scans, all these kind of things. That's heavy duty stuff. And that's something that needs to be done in the data lake. So when you combine the data from a range of studies, historically, we've conducted, thousands of studies. We've existed for 100 years, our company. So imagine the data that we're in possession of. So I'm not saying everything goes in here, but a lot can. And that allows us to maybe find new indications, new trends that we might, go back to the molecule development and then pull through this process. And that is possible because we are the one who facilitates the data, enabling exploration, development, and collaboration across our great company. And this is not a static picture. What is happening is the technologies are developing faster than ever before. So we need, for example, bright minds like yourself, young, committed, enthusiastic people who comes in, who have knowledge about the newest technologies and what we can use them for, right? To the oldies but goldies like myself, I have to unlearn and learn all the time, right? So you need to take that advantage when you get into the market as a valuable resource. You are very cherished because you don't have to unlearn a lot of bad habits first. You get directly into the newest ways of doing things. So that's a nice advantage. Again, as you would think, the overview I showed you before looks pretty smooth. It's not. It's actually really, really complicated, and there are a lot of things to it because you have all the scientific discussions on top of the technology you're supposed to master. And in order to make our life easier, we've tried to look at what are all the manual processes that we have within our work, and then we developed robots for them. So it can be done through, UiPath, Python scripts, .NET programming and so on, and SAS programming also. So depending on what challenge you are trying to solve, you apply the right technology for it. And then we like to give them, you can see our people try to be creative once in a while. So we give them names like superheroes because they help us so much in our daily life that they are our little superheroes at least. And then the same thing, looking at data. Again, we can't look at all data, so we use graphics like this to give us indicators. Where do we see some trends? Where do we see some deviations? Where do we see some positive signals or negative signals in our data? And then, collaborate with our scientific colleagues about what kind of issues or opportunities do we see here, and dig a bit more into that. And that's really exciting. This is where you get to be a little bit of an investigator, play Sherlock Holmes, along with your techie brain gets stimulated. So this has not always been possible, I'll have to say then, to work in this smart way, but because you saw the trend, with the number of patients that we are going to work with to develop new medications, to the number of data points going up and so on, we made a little strategy 3 years back, and that was to help us get through all these challenging phases that we're seeing, develop a new infrastructure, and deal with all the new data that we are seeing coming towards us. So we did a little data management transformation project, and that's basically enabling us to replace our legacy systems with some new modern systems that could cope with more of the data we are expecting, but also allow for more advanced programming on top of the data, so we can really inspect and validate the data in a different way. And again, the process I showed you before, all this development process, that takes years. And we said, okay, well, at least looking at data management, we want to do a project where we can enable ourselves to get off the critical path. So we've actually done that, and it's amazing how much happens when you just start thinking and dreaming and combining those two things. So we actually really, I think in this project and the technologies in scope, we actually made ourselves 80% more efficient than we were before. And at the same time, we saved a lot of money in the process, right? Because the more people you occupy for a longer time, our people cost, if I take an average of, salaries between India and Denmark and other people we work with around the globe, it's probably around $100,000 a year, right? And, when we are a lot of people working a long time on a specific study, that study price has an impact on how much the drug will cost for the patient. And remember, you'll be the patient one day, maybe. I'll be the patient one day, maybe, right? So we better make something that's sustainable. The same thing is, we started looking into how we could use our data lake. So NEEDLE is, our fun little abbreviation for Novo Nordisk Enterprise Data Lake. But I guess NEEDLE is fun because you work in a pharmaceutical company. But anyways, this is what had to enable us to work with big data, because we didn't have, a regular database cannot cope with these large data objects, and that we are enabled to do now. The same thing around data visualizations. We wanted to make, first of all, have a tool to help us facilitate the data, but also, make sure that the data is, the value from the data is extracted, because it's not just about collecting a lot of data. You also want to look at it in a smart way, so you turn data into information and assets to the company. And that's something we've worked heavily on. And then maybe one of the most important ones, you might think it's one of the softer, but it's actually also the keystone about being in this mindset of a learning and innovation culture. That's something that ensures that you can remain one step ahead of yourself. And why do you need that? Well, because you want to again make sure that you use the right technologies, the right processes and methods to collect data, to process data, to clean data, and basically facilitate data to the scientific part of the organization, which you are part of yourself here. So for that, also we have explored design thinking methods and played with artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms, and robotics. So now I can say we haven't only played, because this is something that was defined some years ago. Now we actually have a small army of robots that helps us every day, and we've just started implementing the first machine learning algorithms to also help us in our daily work, and that's really something we're seeing big benefits from. So we've also started looking into how do we work in a smart way. So our colleagues in IT, they started using this SAFe methodology, which SAFe means Scaled Agile Framework for Enterprises. And this is where you work in agile release trains, and this is why you see ART here, ART. So that's the development methodology that you use usually in IT, but actually it can be used in a development setup context. So we started to work like that, and as you can see, even we're a pharma company, this is about developing systems that you see here: data analytics, data facilitation, new, and this is statistical computing environment, a system team, data lake. So a lot of what we do in a pharma company is actually about systems, technology, and data. So being aware of everything we do internally, there's also a lot that impacts us externally, because I've mentioned the regulators a few times now. But they also have expectations to us. It's not only us that are ambitious on our own behalf, but they are also. And because they also, like we do, are pro the interest of the patients, you, me, our families. And they're expecting now we start to use more data to develop better medications. So this is where the real world data comes in. And real world data can be, public registries. It can be, university studies and things like that. So all of that is something that we can acquire and combine with our regulated clinical trial data that we usually work with. And that might save us time, because if we can get some learnings from the real world data that can be acquired by us, or at least we can get access to it somehow, we don't have to conduct a clinical study to get the same data ourselves, and that also give us a head start when trying to develop new medications. The patients are also starting to be more awake and aware that they might have an influence on their health. So they want to follow their treatments, get more information about it. And this is where these devices are wonderful. And now I've pulled it up a lot of times, but it's also a very powerful device, right? If you put the right technology into it. And we started to do that much more now. There's also the healthcare value chain, again, who can be consisting of these physicians, providers of medications, and the payers. Sometimes it's yourself, sometimes it's your insurance companies or public institutions. And they also started to look at the data in ways that we do, and either gives inputs or gives challenge us on the way we work or how we could be working or what we should be looking into. So that's also exciting for us to have that partnership and collaboration. And then, as I've already said, the pharma industry, but also the vendors, technology vendors, have started investing. They've always invested in this industry, but now it's like never before. Not just because the industry is growing, but we've started to recognize that technology is the key answer if we want to make good medications fast. So that's wonderful. And then finally, tech companies entering life sciences in the value chain. Well, just as I said before, that has helped us enable working with big data. We couldn't do that always before, even though we wanted. But now everything is possible because we adopted the technologies. Good. So the must-win battles that we have now, considering that we claim, as I showed you in the beginning of the presentation, that we're a global healthcare leader powered by data analytics and digital technologies. And hopefully you've seen that we are now. And that will allow us to win these battles that we set up for ourselves by making faster, smarter products, by using automation, real-time data and analytics. And hopefully you've seen that a little bit in the slides that I shared with you. We also want increasing insights and value of the assets. And now the assets here is also the data, right? So by modeling, simulating, informed research and development, plus analytics across multiple data sources. So again, data plays and technology plays a big role. And then we want to enable precision health through omics, right? So gene sequencing, sampling, and so on, and imaging, digital biomarkers, and data analysis. And this is something that's possible now, because now we can work with terabytes and petabytes even of data. And that gives us new opportunities. But again, we need to apply our scientific thinking on those data. But the data can also help us apply, the scientific thinking. So all in all, we are well on the way, I think, for our must-win battles with the new infrastructure that we've built for ourselves, as I showed you previously. So that's basically what I chose to bring with me today. And hopefully you see some of the key takeaway messages is that we really want to drive value for the patients, thereby also the society and our company through being data science. And now I'm hoping a little bit that you want to bring some questions to the table, something you might be curious about, something you might be in doubt about, or just dying to know. And maybe I might even be able to answer. So I hope I'll start to see some questions popping in the chat. Otherwise, I could go on and speak forever, but I'd rather hear a little bit from you now.
Yes, sir. No, thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. It was really a very enriching talk. We have with us Dr. Sham as a moderator, who would put up some of the questions which is being asked by the participants as well as some of the students. Over to Dr. Sham.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. Before I think I will put the questions, I would like to echo some of the responses in the chat that it was one of the excellent presentation. That was the comment by most of the participants. And coming on to the questions, first question is, in the broader sense, the rarer diseases are generally neglected, and globally, how well is the data managed for rare diseases?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And it's true, back in the days, rare diseases was neglected significantly. And I want to say it's not just because, we don't know about them, or we don't think we're able to treat them, but first of all, the clinical development process takes 10 to 15 years to develop a drug, usually, sometimes even more. And back in the days, we didn't have technology like we do today, right? So some of the rare diseases have started to be treated, and we start to have some treatments develop, but not with the same pace as many of the other, you can say, generic diseases that we see. But we've actually started a pipeline called serious chronic diseases in our company. And I think what has enabled us to do that now is that we are able, for example, to do gene sequencing. And by that, we can look into, the parts of the data that comes out of it to see where is something wrong. And because we have data scientists that can do, programming on top of, applying science to their work, and working with, doctors and researchers along the way, things can happen much faster and much easier. And that makes it less complicated to produce treatments for rare diseases. So if you ask me, it's not because the willingness was not there, but it was close to impossible with the technologies at hand before, right? I mean, and I told you, before we used to look at, paper forms and data because we didn't have that much. But if you want to treat rare diseases sometimes, and you don't have many patients to test on, it makes the development process, very lengthy and very complicated. And that's not required to the same extent today. And that's why we now, whenever we could, we acquired the technologies available to enable us to start making treatments for rare diseases. So I'm pretty sure you'll get much more of that moving forward.
If I may add something, Abraham,
Mhm.
current world that we are living in, the COVID, for example, it has really changed the way the clinical industry really works, right? So that in itself is a classic example of how we are actually adapting to the current world.
Absolutely. It also showed us that, when we want to, we can actually develop treatments really fast. Now, I would say vaccines is something that has a history of, being able to be developed fast. But vaccines also do not usually go through the same, process with the authorities that we do with the regular treatments. So we have a bit more of a lengthy process and inspection process from the authorities. But when you have, a pandemic, the authorities cannot say, well, it takes the time it takes. No, they have a, global responsibility for the entire planet. So they need to push everything aside and then work only on getting, the COVID vaccines in place. All right.
We have a next question, which is the clinical data collection is the most challenging task for the research. What is your thoughts on this?
Yes, I can only echo that. Um, so you can say there are many ways, and now I've been, in the clinical development process for many years. I think, first of all, if I have to look at it from my angle, if you can motivate the researchers or the investigators at the clinical sites through a very smooth process, right? So facilitating an easy job for them by using the right technologies. Maybe they would prioritize the research work that you're doing. Um, if you have application applications where they can go in and, you know, follow their work, track their data, maybe data of others who are doing similar work in the same field, combining those things, you know, maybe that also motivates them to look more into that and, you know, collect more data for the bigger purpose. So there are many ways to keep them motivated out there, because we also have this challenge, but we also, you know, we're such a big company that we have departments only looking into how can we motivate doctors to work with us on this. And sometimes they call me because they say, well, Ibrahim, can you pull up a solution where doctors can you know, track the health of the patients that they're treating? So we came up with an application called the Health Tracker, and that's an application that the doctors are, you know, could be using on a daily basis, and use it to facilitate the discussion with their patients, where they can sit and look at the graphs together. I mean, see, this is when you started your treatment, this is when you started to feel better, and so on, right? So they can track that visually, and I think that that's usually a big motivation to be able to work and track. And that's why, you know, you also have these, you know, movement trackers or step counters, right? That sometimes motivates you to walk more steps every day to stay healthy. I think that data motivates also researchers to be more engaged in the work that you collaborate with them on.
We have another question from our student. Could you give an example of being managed in the optimized DM system, which you explained in your talk?
Well, the voice was breaking up, Adele. Can you please repeat the question?
Could you give an example of big data being managed in the optimized DM system, which you explained in your talk?
Yes. Okay. So one time, this is what happened a few years ago. Someone had written a clinical study protocol where different assessments were listed, and somewhere hidden in the not hidden in the protocol, but somewhere written in the protocol, it said that we were supposed to do sampling, blood sampling from patients that had to go to lab for gene sequencing. So at that time, I only had a system that was, you know, more or less 20 years old, and knowing that that gene sequencing data would produce again terabytes of data, I knew I couldn't handle it, and it's not just that I couldn't handle it, also I couldn't understand the data coming out, right? I mean, maybe some of you who are in the research sphere, you know, you maybe have been trained to read records coming out of gene sequencing, but to me, you know, I'm used to reading body weight, height of patients, you know, vital signs, you know, pulse, blood pressure, these kind of things, but the gene sequencing is something totally different, and it comes in a totally different volume. So I had to kind of shortcut the process for those data, and we made a space for them available in Needle, and Needle was our Novo Nordisk Enterprise Data Lake, right? So the big data, being able to handle big data, is now possible because we now do have a data lake, and we didn't have that, you know, 3 years ago, but we got it 2 years ago. So now that's been possible to work with big data, and putting the data into the lake enables us to run, you know, advanced programs on top of that data and start getting knowledge that we never that was never possible for us before, because we only had, you know, the small amounts of data collected, you know, from pulse or ECGs, you know, doses and medications that patients were taking and so on. So now we have a totally different opportunity to work with data and do different type of analysis that wasn't possible before. So data lakes is a big gift to the industry.
There was one kind of personal question. What is your inspiration to take up this specific area of research?
Well, I think again, to me, it could have been many different areas in research, but I think Novo Nordisk is, at least when I remember this sentence from my first job interview at Novo Nordisk, I was told that Novo Nordisk is world famous in Denmark, right? And that is somehow true, because it's actually the biggest company we have in the country, and it's also the most prestigious. But now that was not it for me. For me, it was about knowing that this was the number one place I could be if I wanted to stay in Denmark and work with the capabilities that I have and the interest I have. This was the number one company that I could work with, because utilizing my skills in this company, I could help the most people ever possible from Denmark and outwards. So you can say, why this type of research in particular? Well, I don't think we are not bound to any particular research or science, because we do treatment within diabetes, hemophilia, growth hormone, other hormonal treatments, and now we're getting into serious chronic diseases. So I mean, this is just about having the biggest opportunities ever and making the biggest footprint that I can by being at the right company at the right time, using what I do best.
There's another question. Which is the most widely used machine or coding language for this study, this kind of study?
So, if you want to take the traditional type of programming that we do here, is probably SAS programming, and I would like to see us expand much more on programming languages, because that's where I came from myself in the early days when I worked with mobile tech and databases and so on. But we have started, because I also mentioned to you Python is also really winning in, and then R programming. So the R Shiny applications are also getting through a lot. So I would say probably the biggest ones in our industry right now, it's SAS, it's Python, it's R.
Okay. Last question probably. In order to manage this gigantic amount of data, what kind of infrastructure is required? One. Second part is how long will the data be stored?
Yeah. Well, again, the infrastructure is built based on the purpose. So that's a little bit difficult to answer, but you can say some of we usually take in the data that's required to do our analysis. And sometimes the infrastructure for the data is created based on the analysis that you want to do. So you have a pool of data lying around somewhere that you then take into the company and store into the lake. But then you might take pieces of that data and put into a specific infrastructure depending on your needs, right? And then there was a second question to it.
How long will the data be stored?
Yeah.
Whatever data
So
collected.
yeah, that's a good question. So we are obliged to keep the data for many years, and we actually have to keep the data for at least 15 years after we take the product off the market. So probably our data will be lying around for 50, 60, 70 years. That's a pretty long time.
I think we are done with the questions. Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim, for walking us through wonderfully in the world of data management and analysis. Now, I would like to hand over the mic to our student representative, Ms. Achira. Over to you.
Yes, Mr. Ibrahim, it was a great talk. Mr. Vijendra also. It was really enriching, and I hope all my students have got to take away a lot of keynote values of data management, and hope we look forward to work together. And meanwhile, I would just pass on to my final year student for vote of thanks for such an enriching talk.
Thank you, and thanks for giving me this opportunity. I hope it gave you a little bit of inspiration for your further work, and to complete your studies and see that there's a wealth of opportunities for you when you're done. And I hope some of us get the opportunity to work together in the future. Because one thing I forgot to tell you is that 70% of my colleagues, they actually sit in India. So there's a good opportunity for all of you here. So thank you and enjoy the rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ibrahim.
It is my privilege to extend gratitude to Mr. Ibrahim for taking time out of his busy schedule and bearing with the time difference to deliver such an enlightening lecture on the recent innovative trends involving data science and analytical tools in clinical data management. On a personal note, as a biotechnology student studying clinical research and data management as a subject, this lecture has given us a deep insight on how data management works on an industrial scale and has widened our understanding on the underlying concepts in this field. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, great, Vijendra. Thank you a lot.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And just before we drop out, if I may say something, I still remember the year 2010 when one of our senior who had come down to our college just to speak about data management, but it was him who actually exposed me to this world. And then I thought it would be really nice if someone big like Ibrahim can really influence a generation, as he said in the beginning. And thank you so much, Ibrahim, for accepting this and doing this wonderfully and in the simplest of the languages.
Thank you, sir, and have a good day. Thank you,
Yeah,
Vijendra. Have a good day.
you too, guys. Bye.
Bye. Happy with your questions.